energy. Energy is all around you. Energy was created out of the passion of the soul, out of consciousness itself. It condensed it, it compacted it, it squeezed it so hard under tremendous, the pressure, the beautiful pressure of passion, that it created this thing called energy. And it sent that energy out into creation to serve you. You created energy. It's no longer consciousness, it's energy. And it's everywhere. Don't just think in terms of this physical dimension, but think in terms of all the dimensions. There's energy everywhere. There's energy that's uniquely attached to you, to your soul, that's only yours, that can never be taken away by any other person, a god, or any other being, ever. It's yours. It's your core energy. There's other levels of energy: cosmic energy, crystalline energy, and finally earth energy. But they all come from the same source, the passion of the soul to experience. But at some point, consciousness created, in its passion, it created this thing called energy. Energy. Now, energy is represented here by the circle with the dot, or the circumpunct, and then the 4 rays at each corner going out. That's the energy. Consciousness with energy, but you notice the energy isn't inside of that circle, doesn't intrude on that circle. It is all on the outside. It's difficult for the mind to comprehend, because the mind wants to say, well, isn't everything within consciousness? Well, in this case, energy is not, at least not for now. So how did the energy come to being? Well, there was such compassion on the part of the soul. Here you can imagine, wrong word. There was such compassion on the part of the consciousness, the I am. Such, you could say, love for itself, but not a narcissistic human kind of love. I mean, pure, gracious love for itself. I exist, I am. That this kind of thing happened. You can call it the Big Bang of self, not of the universe, but of self. You could call it just such grand expression and passion of the self that you could say that consciousness just had such a desire to know itself and feel itself even more. It created energy. Energy is a song. It's a communication. It's nothing more. It's not a power. It's not a force. It's not a fire. It's not a collision. It's none of those things. You've experienced the expression of energy in those forms. And the world uses a relatively common names for energy, but at its core, it's a song. It's the I am singing out, rejoicing. I exist. I am that I am. It's a song, that's all. It has no duality inherent in it at all. None. There's not a light and a dark. Energy is singular. It is in neutral, so to speak. Neutral, in other words, it's there. But it's in neutral until it's activated, until it's brought into use through consciousness. Now, your I am, the circumpunct, that is not going to bring it into use. It doesn't need to, doesn't want to. Now it's up to you. That part, that part of the I am in expression, to use it. Then it will, you could say, activate. Energy loves resolution. It loves evolution. It loves constant new experiences. That's what it's there for. It's designed. What do we want to jump into today? It doesn't tell you. You choose, but then it's right there with you. Number 1 is everything is energy. This is so important to understand. Everything other than consciousness is energy. This is perhaps one of the most basic things that Shambro can understand and to then live right now. Everything is energy. And what is energy? Energy is communications. That's all it is. It is not a force. It's not a power. It is simply a communication, or as Adamus says, it's the song of the soul. It's the song of energy. This energy is yours. It's yours and yours alone, and it's there to serve you. It oftentimes gets commingled or confused with the energy of others, but ultimately all this energy is just yours. That is the true definition of sovereignty when you come to the understanding and the acceptance that it's all your energy. And everything, all of that energy communicates with all the other energy. All energy communicates with everything, from the soul level to the human, and everything in between, including the other realms. There is always a communication from, you could say, every little piece of energy to every other piece of energy, from energy composites to other energy composites. Energy composite is when energy comes together to form something like the human biology or the human mind or a tree or a car. That's an energy composite. Imagine a vase or vase. It's empty. It has nothing in it. It's just a vase. It's beautiful. But it's not until you add water into it that it gives it wholeness. The water allows for the experience. The water fills the vase. And that's kind of what energy does for consciousness. It becomes the water in the vase of consciousness. It allows the consciousness now to dive into itself, go through experience without it ever diminishing or harming or taking away from consciousness. Now it has a media called the water in which it can experience all that is taking place from the vase, from consciousness. That's what energy is. It's just a song. It's an expression. It takes on different forms in its expression to allow the I am to go within its own creation. Consciousness attracts energy, and energy is outside of consciousness. Energy sits in dormancy. It's kind of like sitting in a big field, a pool, a big reservoir, waiting to be used. Energy is not owned by God or other people or conspiracies or anyone else. It is totally neutral. It doesn't care if you're working for the dark or for the light, if you're Republican or Democrat, if you're a Jew or a Catholic or a Muslim. It doesn't care. You bring in energy into your reality, used to manifest your reality all the time, no matter what's happening. Even when you're feeling low energy, you're still bringing in energy. You are like a magnet that attracts energy, not through your thoughts, but through your passion. I'm going to say this in a simplistic form, but it is basically in a negative and positive form. Doesn't mean good or bad. It's just two differing forces. It's brought in by the passion, brought to this earth by the passion of humanity, brought to you in your life by the passion of your own soul. It's brought in different ratios of positive and negative particles. Particles, not the right word, but the best one I can come up with. And that flows into your life, flows into your body, flows into your reality, and it manifests things like money and cars and food and thought and frequency and vibration and everything else that you see in your reality. It's brought, this light is brought into what I would consider the densest dimension in all of creation. Quite an accomplishment, bringing it in here. Quite an accomplishment watching as it comes from the other dimensions in its pure light form, now gathering the positive and negative particles, and it comes down into this very dense dimension, and it turns into water and soil and air and all these other things. Very interesting phenomena.
You could say that energy, which is nothing more than communication, then takes on, when it's activated, it takes on a form that I call light. And don't think in terms of light as in the light bulbs in your ceiling, but I've yet to come up with a better word. It's light. And that light basically illuminates the moment of experience. That's why I call it light, because it's an illuminator of that moment of experience where the energy will be utilized by you, the human. From that illumination of the light into that moment of experience, which heretofore was nothing, it was totally empty, it was nothingness. But now there's a light there, and that light creates kind of a dimension, kind of a reality is a better word for the experience to occur. The light, the illumination now is kind of condensed even more, compressed even more, to where it takes on an interesting attribute for your planet. It becomes a wave, a wave. Every particle is also a wave. Every wave is also a particle. And now, with the particle and the wave, now you can have matter, mass, solid objects. Consciousness requires no energy whatsoever. It is the maker of energy. And then it uses energy to create the realities in which it can experience itself. No energy in consciousness. It makes the energy from the compassion and the passion of the soul. And then it sends out its light with its energy to create a reality, or perhaps even co-create it with others, as the humans do on this planet. But it sends out that light and the energy to be the architects and the builders of the playground for which the soul can play in. No agenda, no right, no wrong. It's just creating playground after playground for the purpose of experiencing itself. And as it does, it distills everything into wisdom and drinks that in. It fills the chalice, and the chalice overflows in a constant sense of conscious orgasm, constantly in that orgasmic, for lack of a better human word, a constant orgasmic feeling. No agenda. Where does it go? Where does it go after it flows into you and through you? Where does it go? Is there an outer flow? Here we're feeling into an inbound flow into consciousness. Where does it go then? The energies you don't use. Once it's touched by consciousness, by your beingness, it simply goes into a neutral state once again. No longer any charge on the positive and negative of energy particles, but it simply goes neutral. Some would say into nothing. Some would call it a black hole. But I say it's just going neutral. Whatever energies are not used, whatever is not in service to you as it's inbound, doesn't have an outbound. It simply goes back under the great reservoir of energy. And now it just goes into its own quiet sleep, back into neutral, back into that constant state of passion of the soul, ready to come back into service, back into flow for you whenever you're ready.
Well, you are participants in the Crimson Council. Here on Earth, you call it Crimson Circle. But in the other realms, you are active participants in the Crimson Council. You have a role, or you have taken on a responsibility of understanding the nature of consciousness and energy. Now, you would think in the angelic realms, with all the vast wisdom and all the grand beings that we have there, that we would understand all of these things. But we don't. And that's the beauty of it. We don't. We're sharing the experience with you.
The Order of the Ark is, let's say, the gathering of all the angelic families a long, long time ago to try to understand the interaction and the relationship between consciousness and energy. Consciousness and energy. What was happening in creation was that everybody was in kind of a, let's say, a light body form, an ethereal form. You weren't in human form, and everything happened really instantaneously. There was no time, and there was really no space that you know of now. There was a lot of soul beings, kind of, you could say, bouncing around creation without any sort of harmony, management, flow, or control. Everything happened almost instantaneously. But at some point, soul beings began to realize it wasn't so instantaneous anymore. Something was slowing down. They started to have a concern, and not slowing down in a form of time or space, but there wasn't that spontaneous, rapid reaction with energy anymore. It was like the energy was getting murky. It was getting like thick, almost like mud, and it didn't really feel good. So all of the angelic families gathered together in what we call the Order of the Ark. And they said, let's create a place where angelic beings can go to learn about the interaction of consciousness and energy. To go there to really experience it in a slowed down fashion, in time and space, which actually weren't even known back then, but ultimately would become to be known because of Earth. Let's go there and we'll have this very, very slowed down reaction, plenty of time for contemplation, for learning, for redos. That's past lives or incarnations. For redos until we really develop an understanding of this whole thing with energy. Within the past decade or so, but particularly the past couple years, there is an understanding literally sweeping across the planet, not with millions and millions of people, but with enough to make a difference. The coming to the understanding of consciousness and energy, and particularly coming to the understanding that the energy, all energy for any being is actually theirs. There's no unified field. There's no group energy. There's no you over here, everything else over there. It's all yours. There were enough who started realizing this, first as an intellectual concept, but then as a true realization that caused enough of a shift that more and more and more would start to realize this. And ultimately, the angelic families got together once again in the final session of the Order of the Ark and said, they got it. There are enough there on the planet who got it, and now the answer will be reverberating throughout all of creation. It might take a while before the others catch on, but now the fire's been lit, and it will spread, and it will bring an understanding after all this time of energy and consciousness. There's a code that came from a long, long time ago, and a code, an energy code, long before the first spirit, angel ever walked on earth in human form. The code goes all the way back to the angelic families, the very reason for coming to earth, and that code is to understand the relationship between consciousness and energy, and to emerge as, you could say, a God, a sovereign being, a whole being, whole unto their own consciousness and their own energy. And while there were so many good things about Atlantis, there's a yearning to go back there, a yearning to go back to the communal state. But in the code, it wasn't to be. The code that was inscribed within all of you basically said, the journey on this planet is to discover, ultimately, thyself, consciousness and energy. And we didn't know the word. There was no word at the time, and there's no word in Atlantis for love either. But ultimately to discover the love of yourself.